We're going live. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councillor Richard Hollis. I chair this committee. Members of the committee are here: Councillor Debbie Andre, Councillor Vanessa Churchman, Councillor Stephen Hendry, Councillor John Hobart, Councillor Julie Jones-Evans.
Good evening.
Councillor Michael Lilly and Councillor Chris Quirk. And members of the Cabinet and officers are also in attendance. I can't actually see all of them. So, but I know that Councillor Dave Stewart, the leader of the council, is here. The Chief Executive is here. And I've just seen Chris Ashman as well. New legislation in place which allows meetings to be held remotely, whichever means are available to the local authority. That's what we are doing. Mobile phones, please switched off. All participants should be reminded to allow a slight pause prior to speaking for technology to catch up and display correctly. Please only speak when asked to do so, and remember to turn your microphone and video, well, your microphone on because your video will be on, but if you're an officer, can you turn your video on as well before you speak? Voting will be taken by roll call, and when the clerk asks your name, please confirm whether you wish to vote for, against or abstain. All right, now if we can move to the agenda. To confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of September 2020 and the 6th of October 2020, which I have here. Can they be confirmed, Chairman? Sorry? Can they be confirmed? Yeah, can they be confirmed? Yeah, right, that's Councillor Quirk, seconded by Councillor Lilly. Fine, all agreed? Please raise your hands. Right, that's it. Fine, lovely. Thank you. So I will sign these now. That's the 28th September and the 6th of October. And I think I sign each page, as I remember. Initial at the top, yeah. Yeah. Right, that is now done. Are there any matters arising from those minutes? No, we don't do matters arising. Right, okay, so those are approved. Right, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? No. No, none in the chat section, which I can't see. No, nothing in the chat, no. Right, we now move to public question time. Just 15 minutes. We've had no written questions received. So we'll move on to the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service Annual Assurance Statement. And that's to consider the 2020 Annual Assurance Statement from the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service. And we have Steve Apter, who's the Deputy Chief Fire Officer, with us. And the committee is looking to approve the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service Annual Assurance Statement for 2019/20. Mr. Apter.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'm just waiting for the red square around the face. But Chairman, members, thank you. It's a detailed report. It's a pleasure to present to yourselves. You'll appreciate the report obviously relates to the financial year concluded back in beginning of April. The world has gone slightly different since then. Things have slightly moved on. The report is a detailed report, so I'm not going to go into any detail. Obviously, happy to answer any questions if I can for points of clarification. Suffice it to say, the report does lean into our response to COVID as things started to warm up through January, February, and particularly into March. But I think overall the report shows the direction of travel that you as members will be more than aware of through 2019 on the tail end of the Her Majesty's Inspector report, and it shows that progress of the service, and then concludes, as I said, towards the beginning of this year as we started to enter into the COVID period. I'll leave it there. Obviously, it's a highly detailed report. It's a report that you've received since 2013, when the requirement for fire services to receive and to deliver an assurance report was introduced. So hopefully no surprises in the report that you see before you. Chairman, happy to take any questions.
Right. Are there any questions for Mr. Apter? Yes, Councillor Churchman.
Yes, one of my questions is on page 42. We talk about safety plan for 2025. Does this take into account the new structure, where we form a partnership with Hampshire, Portsmouth and Southampton? Is this ours, or will it cover all four of those authorities, please?
Thank you, Councillor Churchman. Chairman, if I may. So the report is, so the annual assurance statement at this point in time is for the Isle of Wight Council. It's still the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service. Members will recall you signed off, you agreed to a joint approach to the safety plan from 2020 to 2025. And whilst you are still two separate authorities, the Hampshire Fire Authority and the Isle of Wight Council, it was felt and quite rightly taken as a prudent approach, an efficient approach, in light of the formal combination, which isn't enacted until the 1st of April 2021. So technically speaking, you and Hampshire Authority, Fire Authority, agreed to take a joint approach to a shared safety plan, but this annual assurance report talks about the preparation towards that, but that only came into being from the 1st of April 2020. So effectively, this assurance report is up to the 1st of April 2020. So the two are slightly separate. The work towards it overlaps with the assurance report, Councillor Churchman.
Thank you, Steve. I thought that was probably the case, but I just wanted to be quite clear. My next question is page 48. Ensure the Chief Officer team leads the programme. Chief Officer team, that's, what does that consist of, I suppose, is what I'm asking. Sure,
that's a good question. The executive group of the senior team, so you've got the Chief Fire Officer, Neil Odin, who in legislation is your Chief Fire Officer, as well as Hampshire Fire Services Chief Officer at the moment, up until the 1st of April next year, and myself as Deputy Chief, so I cover both authorities as well. And within the executive group, we have other members, so we've got the Director of Performance and Assurance, Shantha Dickinson, who some of you will have met recently through the guidance through some of the Her Majesty's Inspectorate process. We have the Director of Ops, which is Stu Adamson, who looks after the clues in the title, all things operations across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. Matt Robertson is the Director of Corporate Services, and Molly is the Director of People and Organisational Development. That's the executive group. We also have Rob Carr, Director of Finance, but Rob also looks after Hampshire County Council, Hampshire Constabulary and ourselves. That's the Chief Fire Officer group, or the executive group, and then we've got the leadership team underneath that, who across the piece look after the delivery, the day-to-day delivery of the organisations.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Apter. That's fine. It's just really for clarification. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Lilly. Councillor Lilly, unmute if you can. I can't hear you, Councillor Lilly.
Can you hear me now?
And now.
Yeah. I think, Steve, my question is, when you reported last time to us, one of the issues was about the welfare of fire officers and particularly their mental health, right? And there was good progress in the work that was being developed, and I think a lot of your officers had mental health first aid training, right? How has been the well-being, the mental health well-being of officers through the pandemic? Because it's a hard job mentally, well, in all the services, but it was probably even more harder through this pandemic. And I just wondered, how is the well-being of our fire officers on the front line?
Thanks, Councillor Lilly. And just to be clear, the reason we didn't explicit report on this in this report compared to the previous one, the previous report was a report against the Her Majesty's Inspectorate findings. This is an assurance report against a clearly defined assurance period of governance, leadership, etc. But in terms of mental health, we've continued to focus and prioritise mental health throughout. And you're absolutely right. For all of us, I would suggest, you know, COVID has confounded what is already for many, you know, a challenging role, particularly in the fire and rescue service. Obviously, I speak to colleagues in the police and other services who've seen this exponential growth in mental health issues and challenges. Our sickness levels, thankfully, remain remarkably low, and comparative to other fire and rescue services, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight fire and rescue services remain low with our sickness levels, albeit we are seeing, with the increase in testing, we are seeing a slight increase in COVID infection rates, but more those people who are self-isolating because of others in their household or they've come in contact with. In terms of the mental health, we continued our prioritisation, as I've said. A lot of work has gone into looking after our staff, looking out for each other. The mental health first aid and the mental health resilience training has really come into its own, I have to say. But we're taking it a bit further now. So we've started, or we're developing dialogue with an organisation who've been working with us throughout, looking at a whole suite of more proactive measures of self-help through occupational health, through the employee assistance programme, but also by enhancing those mental health first aiders. So early days yet, but I'm confident we are addressing those issues as they arise. The problem is, and my family's probably no different than anybody else's, I often talk to my staff, the firefighters, when we deal with a significant incident, generally your control measures, your coping strategies, you know, you go home, you go out with your mates, you go and play cricket, you go and play golf, you go to the pub, you go and see your family. Those coping strategies don't exist at the moment for us because of the constraints we've got. So it's even more amplified. So it's one we really are acutely aware of, not just for the staff who work for us, but their families as well. And that's where the Firefighters Charity, the Mind Blue Light Charity, all of those collectively together helping us to keep our staff as safe as they can be.
No, thank you very much, and best wishes to all of your staff because they are doing a great job. Right.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. I have 3 more questions in the pipeline, or questioners. Councillor Debbie Andre, then Chris Quirk, and then Councillor James Evans. So Debbie Andre, Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, Steve. Good to have you with us, and thank you very much for this report. It does very much for me do what it says on the tin, an assurance report, and taking into account the position we came from to where we are now, I would really applaud you for that. I just have really just a little bit of clarity around the shadow authority. Are we saying, is that the same as the shadow board? Right, okay, so
that's a good question, Councillor Andre. Sorry, and just for clarity, we talk about shadow board, shadow authority, it is the same, one and the same thing, just to be
right.
Really
it's my understanding, thank you for that the shadow authority oversees the programme board. Now, obviously, we were expecting to move over April of this year. Due to it not being signed off the Home Secretary, it's now been delayed. How confident are you that after this transition period that we are going to be in a position to transfer over to the fully functioning board? And do pardon my dog who wants to take part. Thank you.
That's quite okay. I suppose without sounding I chair the Combined Fire Authority Programme Board, so I can give you 100% assurance we will be ready on the 1st of April for transition. In fact, I reported recently to this programme board, because of COVID and because of the lockdown measures, many of the teams who are working really hard towards the combination have been working remotely, working from home. So across the Isle of Wight and Hampshire, we're actually ahead of the game on some of the really big ticket items, particularly around the ICT developments. So all the teams on the Isle of Wight are now linked to Microsoft Teams through the network. So we've been working virtually now for many, many months. That was ahead of the game. But also we have just finished today the staff consultation process through the CFA, and that's been really, really well. I've been really pleased and really proud of the engagement levels of staff on the island and across Hampshire, because obviously it affects everybody. So yeah, I can give assurance, given the fact it's my name on the CFA programme board.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Quirk. You're still muted, Councillor Quirk. No, still muted. No, still muted. No, still muted. Is it this end, Councillor Quirk? You're still muted. What? Right. Is your microphone on? No. Okay, we'll move to Councillor James Evans, and if you see if you can get your microphone working, Councillor Quirk. Councillor James Evans.
Thank you, Chair, and nice to see you, Steve. Thank you for the report. I won't go over what Debbie Andre's already said about the report, but yeah, very good to have the reassurance. So sort of touch on 2 points really. So looking at the summary, I mean, it's great that we've got reasonable assurance now and moving in the right direction. That's fantastic. But I'm just wondering about how what the impact of COVID is going to be on looking at these risk management controls, whether that's some work that can be done despite COVID, whether it's going to be impacted. So that's my first point. And the other one is regarding the prevention and protection, because of course prevention is like most of your work. That's what we want to do, isn't it? You know, stop these things happening. So it's great to see you've made progress in the amount of prevention work you're doing, and also what's interesting, the learning that's come from that as well, to make each visit, you know, more productive and share that knowledge. So again, I'm just wondering about the impact of the COVID on that as well. So I guess really my question is, do you see the next year as being sort of a stay as we are year, improvement year, or perhaps potentially falling back?
Really good questions, 3 in 1. I think I'll wrap them all. No, that's okay. Just for members, and certainly the leader will be aware, this week, and it's just concluded yesterday, we've had nationally, the fire service has been subject to a COVID inspection by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of constabularies and fire service. And they've been inspecting services in terms of their preparation, their response and recovery processes during COVID, a virtual inspection. We expect the formal feedback of that, a draft report later on in December, and that will be published in January. So that's been a really good, useful tool for us to use as a bit of a, take stock, because I am genuinely really proud, and particularly as the fire gold for COVID response. So in terms of the risk question, actually, this is bread and butter for us. We treated COVID as an incident. We declared major incident, as you'll be aware. We've worked extremely closely across the Isle of Wight, Hampshire, and the Strategic Coordinating Group. And I'm really proud of the response our services have taken, particularly on the island, in terms of helping communities. In first lockdown, we took a stance of creating this standing army, and then as we were required, so for example, training firefighters to drive ambulances, to do some of the less pretty side of dealing with the tragedy that is COVID. But the risk management approach we took, and I will say the safety plan, which is a risk management framework, absolutely has stood us in really good stead as an organisation, keeping our eye on what our priorities are, where we're aiming to go, and how we need to get there. So I would go as far as to say I actually think we'll come out of this as a stronger organisation. I genuinely believe that, both in terms of the well-being of our staff, and the staff survey shows that across the piece, but also in terms of organisationally, the safety plan, it's a cultural change. It's not just a plan, but actually we've really tested that through this most challenging of times. So I think in terms of that, the risk management side, we come out even stronger. So, and I hopefully, and I'm confident that the HMI report that obviously as members you will see in due course will pay dividend to that. And I will just cover a bit of detail, and I appreciate this is out of the scope of the assurance document, which was up until April 2020, but we've just received an internal audit assurance report on our risk assessment approach to COVID, and that's come out as a substantial with no findings. So from an internal assurance point of view, you cannot, as members you will be aware, you cannot get stronger. Well, our risk assessment approach has been held up nationally as good practice. So again, some more assurance back to members that we are doing the right thing. And when pockets and when infections arise, as we've seen on the island, as well as in Hampshire, we've got really sound and solid systems in place to ensure business continuity.
Right, you're muted now, Councillor James Evans. But
just supplementary, if I may, it was just really if you just want to give my thanks and to the whole fire service and to everyone who's been leading it. And it's great to see that the plans that are you've practiced and they're written down in documents now have proven their worth and actually gone beyond. So I just thank you on behalf of all of my residents for all of your hard work. Thank you so much, right. And that reassurance that you're there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Quirk, no, still no sound.
Still no sound. I don't know.
There we are. You've got sound.
That's that right. Steve, very good report. Very encouraging. One thing that it doesn't cover is on equalities, and I just wondered if you've made any progress with female frontline firefighters.
Thanks, Councillor Quirk. And again, one of the constraints I've got with this report is it's the timing of it. It goes up until April 2020, and you'll be aware when I reported back at previous scrutiny the great work we've done. Well, we've just gone through a whole-time firefighter selection process using a different process, so the same national process, but we using the benefits of lockdown. We did online Facebook engagement sessions, we did online training sessions, fitness sessions. We gave people longer to get fit. So I haven't got the figures in front of me, but we are running the practical sessions as we speak this week. But the numbers show something like a 45% increase in female applicants, and I think it's 18 to 20% increase in BME applicants as well. So it's been an incredibly successful process. And in fact, the recruitment team are talking about, you know, when we get the other side of this crisis, this health crisis, we'll still use those online tools because it appears to be one of the most effective ways of engaging with communities. It really does. So whilst I can't give definitive figures because people have still got to go through the selection process, but certainly the attraction rate has been phenomenal.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Right. Any other questions? No. Right. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Apter. And I reiterate all the praise that other people have poured upon you and your teams. And thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Do we want to approve the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service Annual Assurance Statement 2019-20? Just show your hands.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
That's unanimous, right? That's everyone. Thank you. Right. I'm sorry, we did go rather out of order so that Mr. Apter could get away. Now, we're now back to the update on current issues. And first of all, the COVID-19 response and recovery. So it's Councillor, I've got Councillor, the leader of the council, Councillor Dave Stewart, and Councillor Stuart Hutchinson. Who would want to come in on that?
So I'll refer you to Councillor Hutchinson, but also Councillor Claire Mosdell, Chair.
Right. Sorry, Councillor Mosdell, I do apologise. Would anyone like to make any statement to that? Oh.
Shall I start, Chairman? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yep. Okay. Good. Thank you. Members will recall that we have got a COVID recovery plan in place, which was endorsed by this committee, approved by Cabinet, and is overseen by the Health and Wellbeing Board. One of the things we were aware of in that plan, which I think everyone accepts is pretty comprehensive, is that we would have to be flexible and that we were aware that we could have a second wave, and that second wave has in fact transpired. In the plan, we had identified a number of categories of operation. The first one, which we're all more than well aware of, is the response from the council and from our many partners, and that carried us through the first few months. I think it's fair to say now we're in our second phase, which is containment. So we have a more limited form of lockdown, and people are still able to work. We are getting additional funding from the government, which we are told is discretionary. I will take that with a pinch of salt, because the last discretionary funding we had came with 8 pages explaining how we were to use that discretion. So I expect we have something similar here. So we will be making further payments to businesses from the government money. We are continuing with our helpline. We have been given some additional funding for CEVs, which stands for the clinically extremely vulnerable people, and Claire may have more detail on that. We were looking to bring some of our staff back into their more usual occupations, but of course this second wave has prevented that, and so we have redeployed staff, including into a COVID support facility, and we have now half a dozen officers, COVID support officers, who've just started. What we also have is what's called a local outbreak engagement board, That meets weekly, informally. It consists of the leader, myself, Councillor Claire Mosdell, because of the social care element, and Councillor Gary Peace, because of the community safety element, and we are supported by our Chief Executive and our Director of Public Health. That has had one public meeting, and its second public meeting takes place this Thursday. So we're keeping a very close overview on situation as it arises. We do all know that even here on the island, although our numbers are low, they have been increasing quite quickly. So we do need to keep a very close eye on containing things and keeping people safe. And that is where most of our effort will be going in over the next few weeks until the present phase is due to automatically end on I think the 2nd of December. But obviously this is a rapidly moving situation. That phase may end at that point, or it may be continued if numbers are not reduced. So we have to keep a very close eye on that. And of course, we'll have all heard the really good news this morning that it does look for the very first time as if we might have an effective vaccine. Very early days yet, but if it proves over the next few weeks that that is an effective vaccine, it is working, and we can get the numbers, that will obviously alter the way in which we emerge from the COVID situation. So that's where we are at the moment. We're keeping a very close eye on it. Our staff, I have to say, are continuing to work really hard. I worry about some of our adult social care staff who are working under intense pressures, but so far we're holding up well. So thank you, Chairman.
Right. Does anyone, Councillor Mosdell, do you want to follow that? Yes. Go on, Councillor Mosdell, and they've been working like a Trojan.
I think I'm still waiting for my square. It's still on your.
We can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, so for me, just to add to that, really, I know we had lots of questions recently of why, you know, on the island when our figures were relatively low, why we were going into a lockdown situation. When you look at the island, what you need to remember is that we are in quite a fragile situation, having one hospital. I can't tell you how many times over the last 3 years that I've been involved in with our officers from adult social care being involved with the hospital when the hospital has gone into Opal 4, which is, you know, a high alert because A&E is blocked up, MAU is blocked up. It doesn't take a huge amount for that to happen. So we are in quite a fragile situation. What we need to do is keep reiterating those messages to the general public that although we're in this form of lockdown at the moment, we need to not relax, and we do not need to be mixing, you know, lots of different households together. We just need to continue by the rules. We've only got 3 weeks left of doing it, and it really will make a difference, you know, remembering that we only have that one hospital, you know, and we might have low numbers, but they are increasing, so we do need to be incredibly careful.
Right. And do you wish to add anything, Leader? Councillor Stewart?
Bear with me, Chair. I'm just linking back in again.
Sorry.
No, I think my two colleagues have very adequately summarised where we are, and I would agree with them, and indeed all those that say we need to just work hard during this lockdown to stick to what was been agreed. Because that's going to be the best opportunity at the other end of it to come out in the right place. So, no, I thank both my colleagues who have done a good job.
Right. Has anyone got a question? Or Councillor Quirk, and then Councillor Jones Evans, and then Councillor Lilly.
Can you hear me this time?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
A question to Councillor Hutchinson. Can you give us a little bit more detail about the help for small businesses, and when that becomes available and how it's going to be handled?
I may have some more information through the chief executive, but when we were looking at that, we were told that we would have I think £20 per head of population, and we expect that the businesses that would be entitled to it would be similar to the ones that were entitled the last time around. But at the last meeting I was at, we were waiting for some further information from government, and I believe the chief executive may well have that information. If not, Chris Ashman may be able to help on that.
Right. Do either of those two wish to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. If I may, just to confirm what Councillor Hutchinson has said, the information for businesses goes live on the council's website tomorrow, so they can start to make applications. There is a fund of £2.8 million, which is effectively a discretionary fund for those businesses that can demonstrate that they have lost trade as a result of the lockdown. So they're still trading, but they've lost trade because of the numbers. And there are a number of criteria that apply to that, which will be published on the website tomorrow. There's a second grant aid scheme which relates to property values, and any business that has been required to close because of the lockdown is entitled to get that grant, and it falls into three bands. So those with occupying a premises that's got a rateable value of less than £15,000 get a certain fee. Those that have got occupy a rateable value of more than £51,000 get a fee of a grant of £3,000 for a month, and those in the middle get a grant, I think it's about £1,000. But as I say, all the detail is on the website tomorrow. We do need people to apply because we have to account back to government for the funding, and we can't just rely on having the people's details from the previous scheme. We need them to reapply. Hope that helps, Chairman. Thank you.
Right, Councillor James Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, quick question for Councillor Stewart and Councillor Hutchinson, if I may. Councillor Mosdell mentioned the fragility of our hospital, and of course the fragility of our economy was picked up by the Institute of Fiscal Studies in the summer, highlighting the Isle of Wight and Torbay as being two areas in the whole country that are going to be really suffering from the effects of the first lockdown. So I guess my question is, given our tier status, and notwithstanding further rises, of course, that the safety's got to come first, but it's really what's our strategy about lobbying government for coming out. So if they're talking about this tier strategy coming out, then hopefully that you're lobbying hard that the island has proven that we need to come out, and we've behaved ourselves, if you like, but no, we need to recover quickly to avoid any further damage to our fragile economy.
Yeah. Do you want me to pick that up, Stuart, or do you wish to?
Well, I think, Dave, I'll leave you to answer that, but I can say to Julie that I know that our leader has been really irritating Boris to try and get additional funding for us, and we are working very hard on that. I have a particular interest, of course, in discovering what additional funding we've got, because we are in the throes of preparing next year's budget, and we're still trying to contain the problem of this year's budget. So I'll allow the leader to make any further comments that he may wish about his engagement with government on this.
Yes, well, Stuart's confirmed what is already published in the full council papers, that amongst all the other things that I'm sure the Prime Minister is up to his eyes in at the moment, I thought ensuring that he was not to forget the commitments made regarding funding for the island, which shows that we are actually £6.4 million in deficit, if that's the right phrase, each year. I have been in personal communication with him. Copies of my correspondence have gone to the Robert Jenrick, Secretary of State, and to Rishi Sunak, Chancellor, and indeed to our MP, Bob Seeley. So there's more information on that, which I could share with you. But to say at this stage, that avenue of approach has been maintained. In addition, through our very, very good Public Health Director, Simon Bryant, I know that our Isle of Wight interests are very, very well looked after. And I've been on a number of calls with Simon, not just for the Isle of Wight, but what he also obviously covers Hampshire as well. And I'm very reassured that he is making all the efforts he can to keep the Isle of Wight in that place. But I think you're absolutely right. And it's something that Claire Mosel said earlier. People don't realise that how fragile the island situation is, albeit we've got relatively low cases. If our Isle of Wight hospital were to be inundated now, it wouldn't take long for it to be completely overwhelmed. Now, they've done a fantastic job at the hospital, and at the moment we're in a good place, but that's why it's so important the island community commit to the rules and guidance that have been put out on lockdown, so that we come out of this in the place we went in. And that then gives us an argument, as we did Cornwall and other places of our situation. We can say to government, you know, leave us where we are. We're able to cope with it, provided you look after us. So I think there's quite a bit of work to do, but I am hopeful that with this lockdown, one of the benefits for the island will be that we won't get up into the territory of the north of England, for example, which has got some horrendous numbers. Having said that, even on the island, the latest figures I saw in the last 7 days were 86 cases, which is a far higher position than we were. So with absolutely no reason to be complacent. And I'm hoping that through all public meetings, and this one included, all members will encourage residents to comply with what they've been asked to do. And I know the Chief Exec gave a very broad presentation to members just a few days ago. So hopefully everybody's got that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, no, thank you very much, Councillor Stewart. Just one more supplementary, if I may. Have you asked for our £6.4 million to be backdated, please? Obviously about £30 million to my reckoning.
Thank you. I'll take note of those figures. Your maths is probably better than mine, but to be quite honest, I'll be happy if the Prime Minister acknowledges it and says it's on its way. But that all remains to be seen.
Well,
Having said
we're
that,
all behind you on that, Councillor Stewart. You know,
indeed.
every single person on the Isle of Wight.
Yeah.
Indeed. I think the other thing I'd say, and I've done some research on this, which I'll be presenting probably at full council, it is surprising how much money this government has provided for this island already this year to support our response to COVID. And we've just talked about £2.8 million that's coming in just for small businesses. And that needs to be, we need to get that out to businesses, and the Chief Exec's absolutely right. We want to get that out there because once some of our businesses have gone, they've gone. And we just need to do all we can. And the eye line of this vaccine, which could be, you know, in play certainly by the end of the winter, I think that we've got to keep our businesses going so that they can then come out, and that's why the other strategy here is to boost our economy as soon as we can. Thank you for your question.
Right, Councillor Lilly. Councillor Lilly?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, gosh. Right.
I thought you were playing the piano then.
I have three specific questions.
No, you've gone off. We've lost you. Lost your sound.
All right. Are you there now?
Yes,
yep.
It's better.
And firstly, for Councillor Stewart, the ferries, the Fast Cat has ceased yet again. I have read that you are making representations because obviously that is a very important mode of travel to for the island, and you know, very particular for Ryde, because a lot of people travel backwards and forwards for Ryde work in Portsmouth, live in Ryde, etc. And it's very important for trade. It took a lot of quite a lot of work to get it back in August, because the Wight link were very clear that if they weren't making money out of it, they weren't necessarily going to run it. And I do feel there is a concern, or very strong concern, that of businesses and the public, that it won't automatically come back in December afterwards, and I think we need to ensure that. That's my first question. I've got two others. Thank you.
Can you ask all three actually? Just quickly.
The second question is, through government funding, you very generously supported all the 26 community response hubs, which actually got out support to people, did organise volunteers. And I think it's important to note that very quickly all those hubs re-engaged and came together and actually are now delivering on the ground. And a lot of the volunteers that were in operation through lockdown and out there supporting people. Is it planned to give the kind of grants that you gave across to those 26 hubs, or some financial help to them, as previously done in lockdown? And my third question is to do with the COVID support officers. I would like to know more exactly what they do, and are they working and linking with town and parish councils?
Right.
So,
do you want to
hear
deal
me,
with the
Chair?
ferry first? Yes.
Yeah, so the ferries, really good question, Councillor Lilly. You can imagine my disappointment at hearing that the fast cap was to be withdrawn. We understand clearly that the Wight Link, Red Funnel and Hover Travel are commercial businesses, and clearly running at a loss is a major issue for them. However, I also think there is a public obligation here, and it's important that we do all we can to maintain that. We have key workers going from Ryde to Portsmouth, to the hospitals in Southampton. We have people going over for medical treatment, etc. I could list it. So, and I would acknowledge the work of Wendy Pereira, our Assistant Chief Executive on this. She has been actively engaged with all the ferry companies and through our Transport Infrastructure Board, the Department of Transport. What on the positive side, first of all, the car ferry will remain active, as I understand it, from Fishbourne to Portsmouth, from East Cowes to Southampton, and now following some strong representations, and thank you to Councillor Brading, the Yarmouth to Lymington route, which gets our children to school at Brockenhurst. So those are positives in my view. In regard to the hover travel, they've also stepped forward not only to provide the service, but also to make sure they're on those occasions, as you will know, because you're a Ryde member, when the weather is rather inclement, there are times when the hover travel can't run. And on those occasions, people will be able to travel free by a bus that is provided through to the car ferry to make sure that they can get there and back. So that is a positive, I think. We are, in fact, it seems surprising, almost a week into the 4 weeks of this lockdown. So we only have 3 weeks to go. And I would like to think, with Christmas coming up as well, and Portsmouth, Gun Wharf, etc., being available to the islanders, that the ferries will see that there is actually a financial benefit from reopening to maximise that trade. We have had quite conversations with our MP as well, Bob Seeley, and he has taken the issue to the DfT along with our own officers. But it's a bit of a wait and see now. There is no doubt the ferry companies know our views and our concerns. It's a lifeline service that we must maintain, but unfortunately, it's not within our gift to tell them what to do. Unfortunately, we don't own the ferries, we don't run the ferries. We can help and encourage, but it is a commercial decision which we will then have to face when we get there. So I can say without a shadow of a doubt, the ferry companies are fully aware of our concerns. And I wait to see now how they respond in due course, probably over the next 2 or 3 weeks, when they will have to make those decisions. But certainly be in no doubt, the council has expressed its views. but it's a difficult question, that one, and of course the government can play a key part should they wish to do so, and I think in a couple of weeks' time we'll be having those additional conversations. So that was the ferries. Is that helpful? Is that okay?
Thank you.
Yep. Yes. The second question was around the community hubs. Absolutely agree with you, and thank you to Ride for all the work they've done. Out in my area, we've got a crab group and other groups, and one of the things that we have agreed is that funding will be available. Further funding will be available. It'll be by application as before. We particularly will be focusing on what we call the most clinically vulnerable, and we've put some public releases out defining that. And if anybody's in doubt, they can obviously ring 823 600, where we've got a helpline that's now 7 days a week. And I'm encouraging local community groups that need extra money. Some are more need it now than others, but to make an application, and it will be dealt with sympathetically, because we've learnt the lesson that those community hubs were absolutely essential to the support of our community, and I know this administration is particularly keen to support that. I forgot what your third question was, and I apologise.
COVID support.
Oh, COVID, yes, COVID. Right, so this was, we had some success back in the summer with beach ambassadors. Some of our staff who were otherwise going to be not working, they came across and helped us form COVID ambassadors. And we follow the same principle. So for me, we've got COVID ambassadors now. Their proper title I should use is COVID support officers. But in practice, these are members of our own staff who will be going out, engaging with businesses, with individuals, and pretty well with anybody who they can just remind what the rules are, encourage them to follow the guidelines, and deal with any local issues. They're not enforcement officers. They're not formally empowered to do, issue fines or whatever. But actually, we found from the summer that just by having a friendly conversation and educating people, it actually worked really well. And I know a lot of other authorities. I've just had a contact now from contact on the mainland who are saying, "Can you tell us about this? What is this you're doing?" Because it's actually islanders looking after islanders, and I think that's really good. So it'll be encouraging. There are some sort of specific things they can do, but actually a very flexible group. And what we're hoping is that extra bit of support will actually help our island to follow the ground rules. They're particularly focused on information and guidance to businesses in the first instance, because that was an identified area. I think it'll be very useful. And actually, I think some of the staff, for example, come from our leisure centres, which are closed. And so they're just flexing their role and they're working for the community. I don't think we will get this, but I hope we don't get any abuse of those individuals by members of the public, because these are not highly trained officers or anything. These are just good, hard-working council staff who are doing their bit for the community.
Right. I've got a note here that John, the Chief Executive, has said, may I also come in? But I don't know whether that's for these questions or one before. And
I think I've covered most of the things.
I think you probably have covered. I don't want to sort of go over ground. And I wonder if Simon Bryant wanted to give an update on anything. No.
Good evening, Councillor Hollis. Very happy to give an update on the figures if that's helpful. With that of use to the. So yes, as Councillor Stewart said, the rate that we look at the 7-day rate, which is a really important rate for us, and the rate for the Isle of Wight is 60 per 100,000. Now, as we've all said, that's much less than the other parts of the country. However, that is going up on an almost daily basis. So yesterday that rate was 53.6. So going through my notebook, so it's going up. So whilst we are in a very good position, we need to be really mindful that those cases aren't going in the right direction. So we need to do all we can during lockdown periods to reduce those numbers, and that will include our social distancing measures, our hand hygiene, wearing face coverings, and isolating when requested. I'm really grateful for what the island population has done, but this is a really serious situation, and as Councillor Stewart has outlined, there's a lot we need to do, and we are doing to prevent further spread of infection. as always, happy to take questions on the data if that's helpful.
Right. Any questions? No. Yes. Councillor Churchman.
Yes, Councillor Churchman. How many people actually in hospital at the moment, please, Simon?
So the hospital data is really quite complicated. We look at admissions to hospital, and we look at people diagnosed in hospital. When you look at the rate, our rate is around 5 per 100,000 for COVID. But what that will do, that will look at those people admitted with symptoms and tested positive, and also those people who go to hospital for something else and then get tested positive. Our hospital's in a really good place, but again, we've got to be really mindful that as those figures go up of community spread, we will start to see an increase in hospital admissions. But as yet, we are certainly not in the place of the rest of the country, the northwest of England, where they are having to cancel operations. That's one of the first two things we do. Also, mind you, this is patient information, so small numbers I won't give out at a public committee.
Right, Vanessa, did you want another Councillor Churchman?
Yes, you haven't answered my question. How many people are actually in hospital with COVID at this point in time?
So that information is in.
Councillor Marston, do you want to?
Yeah, can I just come in? I think Simon did answer your question. Because the numbers are very low and we live on an island, that's not the type of information we would give out at a public meeting. They are low numbers, and that's the assurance that we can give you. But as Simon said, you know, we do have that position of patient confidentiality, and all we can give you at the moment is assurance that the numbers in hospital with COVID are very low.
Right, thank you. I mean, as an observation there, I mean, as we are testing more, numbers will inevitably look higher. I know someone who went into hospital and got tested, had no idea they had COVID at all, gone home to isolate, had no symptoms, but tested positive. Right. Shall we move on then? No, yes, we'll move on, I think. Can we move on to that well-known topic, the Cowes Floating Bridge?
Yes, no problem, Chair. I'll be leading on that.
Right.
When you're ready.
Yes, go on.
So the first thing to remind ourselves always is that the primary role of that floating bridge is to provide a service for the community, particularly the community of East and West Cowes. So I always put money second and think about the service first. It's really important. Now, the following update will inform members of the progress with exploration of the potential cost and effect of installing side thrusters, which was a topic we discussed at the previous meeting, and to replace the current use of the push barge, which costs the council in excess of some £97,000 per annum. It will also address the most recent problems experienced with the hydraulics and the bow hydraulic arm, which are being addressed as we speak. And reference will be made to the legal process, which is underway. So in relation to the thrusters, option reports regarding side thrusters have now been received by officers and will in due course be presented to the Floating Bridge Project Board for further consideration. At this stage, no decision has been taken regarding the installation of side thrusters, and this will remain the case until the board has had the opportunity to consider a range of matters, including likelihood of these being a successful alternative to the current arrangements, the environmental impact, installation timescales, and most significantly, the cost of installation, which is expected to be substantial. The further hydraulic failures, however, last weekend, you will be aware that we had problems with one of the hydraulic bow rams. The failed ram had been removed and replaced. The ramp operation has been tested and works. However, during the inspection, it was revealed that the inner piston end had sheared off, and there was what we call is known as a fatigue crack, which was evident. So all 4 hydraulic rams are now being checked to ensure they do not have similar problems. This work is expected to be completed shortly, and the vessel will then return to service. It is very disappointing because having taken the vessel out for some months, to have the hydraulic system completely repaired and replaced. In the first 2 weeks that it came back, and if you recall, that was the week commencing the 19th of October, we carried something like 4,000 passengers, a similar number of vehicles, and generated an income of over £10,000. So when it is in play, it's certainly used, and its generation of income to cover costs is there. But the fact is, at this moment in time, we had a problem, and that then takes me to the legal update, because as members are aware, legal discussions are ongoing between the council and the two companies contracted to design and build the floating bridge, with a view to recovering the costs of any financial losses sustained to date and the costs of implementing any solutions. The evaluation report on the thruster options will need to be finalised before legal negotiations with parties can progress. And in addition, the legal process will now need to take account of the recent issues with the hydraulic system and the hydraulic bow arm. So in terms of, if you like, the legal position, that is now able to move forward, but will now take account of the latest situation. But I take you back to the beginning of my comments. At the end of the day, what we need is a vessel travelling across that stretch of water that is fit for purpose and can get the two communities linked, because it is so important. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Right. Any particular questions? I mean, I do actually have some questions and something to add. Councillor James Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a bit worrying to hear about the damage now to the hydraulics, and from what I can gather, it's the original hydraulics that were just repaired, rather than a new set of hydraulics going on. This will bear out with the fact that the fatigue crack has appeared. It's just so concerning, because it just doesn't seem, after we've had a trouble with the hydraulics before, but after 3 years in service, it's not the standard of engineering that we expect, is it? It's letting us down on so many fronts. And I say again, when are we going to say enough's enough? And these side thrusters just sound, frankly, I've not seen the report, obviously I've just received it, but it sounds terribly expensive to me, just in the fuel costs alone. But maybe it might be cheaper than £97,000 a year to having sea clear and keep the vessel in check. Anyway, that's enough from me, because once I get going, I'm not going to stop. So I'm sure other members have got other things to say.
Yeah. So Councillor Jones Evans, you didn't ask a question, but I probably have some sympathy for all the comments you made.
Right.
The question was regarding the hydraulics. Were they the original ones?
Yeah, so there's two parts. There's the hydraulic system, which is, if you like, all the oil and everything that goes around the vessel. That's been addressed and dealt with. The hydraulics relate specifically to the bow rams that go up and down and make the vessel be able to lift its bows and people to go to get on and off, etc. It's something that we're aware of. We certainly weren't expecting to find fatigue inside, and clearly that. Well, it's not for me to prejudge anybody else, but my lay position is, that has something to do with the design and suitability, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We do have Councillor Ward on the line as well. I don't think he probably doesn't want to add anything to what I've said, because I probably covered it all, but that's where we are. He may be able to assist with any further questions from other members.
Right.
As a supplementary, I think basically my question would be, Councillor Ward, do you believe the hydraulic system and the arms that we're using on the bow are actually big enough and strong enough for the job they're intended?
It's not a marine engineer.
It's been recognised, I think, right from the very beginning, that the ramp structure could do with beefing up, and that is one of the projects to be looked at, to improve it. But we're still surprised that it's failed in this way. We wouldn't have expected that to happen.
Right. I mean, I think this perhaps comes down to some really sort of fundamental, and what I'd like to suggest is that as an authority, that we start to check out various questions. I mean, you have the council who obviously put the original idea to some marine architects. Marine architects, the question I would ask is, did the marine architects, and who did they ask, did they ask the right questions? Because we do have a problem with the tidal flow, and at the moment the floating bridge is not fit for purpose. Who did they ask with regards to the tidal flow? What were the questions they asked? What were the answers they were given, and by whom? Because it comes down to sort of just various parties. This is apart from the build quality. And we all know those people, all of us who use the river, and particularly I'm sure the people on the chain ferry appreciate that in recent years, because of the breakwater, there has been a change of tidal regime. And that may well be the answer to the questions, as long as the questions are asked. You know, what was the change in the tidal regime? Were they given the right answers? And I think that is really important, because that is one of the main reasons, I believe, that you would use in your calculations of whether this is the right ferry for this particular place. And then you ask the questions of the build. But these questions need to be asked now, because we cannot keep on going on like this. It's ridiculous. And I think people on the island feel very let down. Anyway, that is enough from me. Councillor Laura
Chair, can I respond to your questions? I think they're very good and valid questions, and what we can do, I'm sure there's a record kept to this meeting. These questions can be passed now to the lawyers who should be asking that and researching that. So that's what we can undertake to do on those. Thank you.
Right. I've got a number of people, and I can see Councillor Lilly's got his hands up, but a number of people, Councillor Lilly, I think I'm going to have Colin Rowland. Can Colin Rowland come in, please?
Councillor Hollis, Councillor Stewart came back with the same comment that I did, that your comments are noted and they will form part of the legal conversation.
Right. Right, Councillor Lilly.
Thank you, Councillor Hollis. I'm in agreement with you. The issue of the breakwater and the tidal changes is very important and has to be looked into. My father, who actually died in late 2015, was the founder of ship science at Southampton University as the lead professor there for over years. And he, in his last year, pointed out, when I took him in his wheelchair, constantly how the breakwater was going to change the tidal flow and how that was going to affect. So that has been known for some time. I particularly raise the issue again of the risk registers. I know I'm repetitive on this, but the only risk register that I saw back in 2017 had in red from the manufacturers was the issue of the hydraulics. It's very clearly there was being raised, and I think that risk register was dated 2015. So right from the beginning there were issues and in 2017 I continually asked for the future risk registers that clearly would show the mitigation that should have been done with those known problems within that. And I absolutely confirm with Councillor Stewart and John Metcalfe that they need, and Councillor Ward, that they need to be taking this up with the lawyers, because the specifications were clearly wrong, and
Right,
the people
okay.
of this island have actually suffered for that.
Okay, right.
I'll respond to that, Chair, if you want, very briefly.
Yes.
I actually agree with Councillor Lilly, and it's easy for some people to sit back and say, well, it was the previous administration and they should have had a project board, which they didn't, and they should have done this and that and the other. The fact is they didn't do it. And what has happened over these subsequent years is we've had to keep picking up all the problems that have emerged. And you're quite right, Councillor Lilly. This will now form part of that legal discussion and process that's on, because that's the only place we can put it to get back to the source of the problem. We do have another piece of work which I'll be announcing on Thursday at Cabinet, which I just need to wait for the to finalise, which will be happening. And then I'll be able to add to another piece of work which we've agreed to take forward as well. And all these things are designed to try and see who's at fault and get these issues resolved, so that we get recovery of the money that we've had to spend to keep this floating bridge going. But we've also got to look ahead and think going forward. And I think the chair asked, or somebody asked the right question. It might have been Julie actually. When is enough is enough? What else can we do? Because I think we all would agree we want to see a service for the people from East and West Cowes. And that's the primary goal, but our budget is under pressure, big pressure at the moment, and so we're having to manage it very carefully. So thank you for your points, Councillor Lilly, and I will ensure they get passed on. Right,
now I'm going to go to Councillor Laurie Pearson-Wilcox. Is a councillor very much concerned with this, as is Carl Love, because their wards are on either side of the offending ferry. Councillor PC Wilcox, do you want to come in and ask a question?
Thank you, Councillor Hollis, and thanks everyone for your time and patience. As you know, that this has been an ongoing issue, and I think Councillor Hollis, you're exactly right about the breakwater. We did predict that there would be issues, and I think one of the questions that the legal team need to ask was any modelling done? Because it's something that we don't know. As councillors, I will reiterate once again, I was told, Laura, butt out. This is a procurement issue. We are protecting your back. You are to have no involvement. That's what I was told categorically. So that's why, there was things that was going on that we weren't very happy about. Could I just say the project board, who sits on that, please? Are we entitled to know who sits on that? Because that would be quite interesting. Do they have minutes of those meetings? Are they public? All of that sort of stuff, because it's news to me. I was going to say about how much we're paying Longitude and what kind of qualifications have they got, because already council staff have used people that that advised them on the floating bridge. So our Longitude of the same calibre of the people that advised them to buy this floating bridge in the first place, because I'd have concerns about that. We're halfway through November, and obviously I've not seen that report from Longitude, which maybe I'm not supposed to, but it would be quite nice as the local member. Obviously, we know about the fatigue crack. Well, I do now, Councillor Stewart, so thanks for telling me that, because this is the first I heard about fatigue crack. So that's useful, because obviously that we haven't had a report. The report in this meeting was for the previous issue, not the one the floating bridge just keeps gave recently. So I won't say any more, but yeah, just to say more about that Longitude, the project board, and I think that was it. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. I'll ask the Chief Exec to come in on the members of the project board, although Councillor Ward could also cover that. Just in response, I just want to say publicly thank you to Councillor PC Wilcox and Councillor Carl Love. They've taken a very pragmatic approach to the situation. We've been working together now, and one of the things on a previous board, you will recall, we said we would meet with two expert individuals to discuss the situation, who are giving of their free time to help and advise, and that they have done that, and they've given us some thoughts, and we've passed them on to officers. And Councillor PC Wilcox is absolutely right. I think I would really appreciate a list of questions from Scrutiny, which we can pass to the lawyers, so that we make sure all of our interests are properly covered, and then we can look to how we can move forward in the future in a positive way, rather than just shooting bullets across each other, which hasn't happened tonight, which I'm pleased to see. I'll ask the Chief Exec just to deal with the point that Laura's raised around the the project board, if you're happy for him to come in.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I would, if I may make 2 points. So firstly, I think it's in terms of the appointment of Longitude. Longitude was appointed in consultation with our legal advisors, who are now advising us legally. So they're appointed on the basis of being, if you like, forensic engineers as well as an engineering company. So their expertise is proven and of a stature for the lawyers to be able to rely on their evidence should we get to that particular point. I really wouldn't want to say too much more, obviously, about the legal case, because of course there's an awful lot of things that will still have to flow to be done around that one. But their appointment is specifically because of their ability and their ability to, if you like, be an expert witness should we get to that particular point. In terms of the project board, members of the project board, there are officer members in terms of the lead. Sorry, there are political members in terms of the leader and councillor ward. Officer members from finance and from the operational team, and the Director of Neighbourhoods. So we have a team there, a project board there, that oversees the works that we are trying to do to get the floating bridge working effectively and efficiently, and trying to unpick all of the issues. In terms of sharing the information, I think some of the information has been treated as official sensitive because of its relationship to the court case and because of the relationship to commercial confidentiality, but I'm sure we can share some information with members on a confidential basis as required.
Right. I've got two people who want to come in. One is Colin Rowland and the other is Carl Love. Carl Love's been waiting for some time. Councillor Love, I think, can I ask Carl Love to come in now, and then, but I just want really questions, and then Colin Rowland, if that's the right order. Are you happy with that?
I'm certainly happy with that. Yeah.
Councillor Hollis, I think mine was a legacy hand.
All right. Councillor Rowland and then Councillor Love. Sorry, not Councillor Rowland, Mr. Rowland.
No, I was just saying, Councillor Hollis, that my chairman, that my hand was a legacy hand.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay, right. Councillor Love.
Thank you very much for allowing me to ask a couple of questions. You know, my residents, you know, I'm not really that interested in the past. We just want this fixed like everybody else. We want it fixed sooner rather than later. We seem to have this, what I call institutional blindness, in the belief that we can fix it no matter what. Time that we gave this completely across for completely independent engineering, have the vessel inspected, completely inspected by naval architects, other than what we've had before, because it just seems to me that we're going around and around in circles. We had a report done by Wight Shipyard. What's happened to that report? Has it been published? I'd like to see what their recommendations were, because they were asked to look at resolving some of the problems. I'd like to see that report, please. So a full strategic report on the vessel itself needs to be undertaken, because it seems to me that everybody that's involved in this are the same people that were involved right from the beginning. Let's have a completely clean sweep. And I'm rather disgusted at this project board, because this is the first that I'd heard about it, and the local members are not even involved. That's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Right. So I'll respond to Councillor Love. I'll start by agreeing with him, and I think he's already made it clear he's looking forward, not backwards. The Longitude report and the work of them is specifically to deal with some of the detail that he said, and that's what's going in the legal process. I will on Thursday be able to, hopefully, if it all goes to plan, detail to him and other members steps we are taking in relation to independent assessment, but I can't do that at the moment because it's not totally within my control to get that information out. And with regard to the vessel, if you like, I think there's a common understanding and that we need to sort this out and we need to go forward with a plan. In terms of the project board, it's apparent to me now that some members don't appreciate how the administration operates. So I'll give you some examples. The PFI contract, which is the single biggest contract we've got in the council, is managed through a project board. And we have regular meetings with our corporate management team and indeed with Island Roads, and we hold them to account through that process. We also have a members board, which is the most senior board we've got, which is myself and Councillor Hutchinson, and Councillor Hastings is there as well. And we look at all the projects the council is doing, and we, if you like, hold officers to account and make sure we're on track with everything we're doing. We have a regeneration board, which also sits, and Councillor Whittle is on that, and that looks at all the regeneration projects that we're doing. And we found as an administration that having a board, having officers explain internally to the cabinet members and others what they're doing is an effective way of holding people to account. It's not so much about that, it's actually keeping projects on track and making sure we with the limited resources that we have, we're getting the best that we can. I'm more than happy if members outside of this meeting wish to have a list of the project boards that we've got, but that system has worked for us. So coming back to the floating bridge, it sits as a project on the basis of its challenge, its cost, its importance to cows, and indeed to it. But it's a councillor cabinet-led board, if you like. Hopefully that answers that question. Yes, that's all I can say really.
Right. I think if we've no more to add on this, the point of the Councillor James Evans, and I'll just finish what I'm saying. The point of the questions is that at some stage we may well have to build another one, and people have liability, and they have liability insurance, and they have, if they have liability, you have to let them be able to rectify or justify first. You can't just give it to someone else. Right, Councillor James Evans.
Thank you, Chairman, for that. It was just really just to make a point and ask a question regarding Newport. Now, members will recall last time we discussed this, it was agreed that myself, Councillor Love, and Councillor PC Wilcox meet with the lead of the council. The leader of the council did not want me to be there because, as you've heard, the leader of the council believes this is primarily an issue for cows and East Cows, and he's not wrong there. But this does have a big impact on Newport and traffic flows through Newport, as says in the business case. This one of the reasons that we were given the money was to relieve the traffic in Newport. So it is a wider issue than cows and East Cows. And as chair of the community council, I've writing a letter tomorrow to the chief executive regarding the concerns that Newport has. I won't go into it now, but I was just saying, if the leader would like me to, I'm happy to send him a copy, and Councillor Ward as well.
Okay, right. Thank you, Councillor James Evans. I think we'll take a break now for 10 minutes, and then we will carry on. Right, thank you. All right. Well done. I was scared. It'll speed up, I'm sure. Speed up. I had a. Yeah. Oh. It's off. Yes. I had a word with the leader, and I said I'm going to bring out this thing about questions because it then gives them the lead to then formulate those questions. I mean, really, it's fairly simple.
Councillor Hollis, your microphone is still on.
Oh, what's that? Did you just turn back on again? The speaker.
Is it
It's
on
on,
now?
is it? Okay. All right. Do we have a 2-hour limit on these meetings?
3 hours.
3 hours. Ah, what did I do that for? I've only got a few people in this meeting, and I can't see.
So all apart from Councillor Quirk. Is it? Oh yeah, yeah. He's just come. Yeah. Right. So right.
I'm here.
Yeah, you got everyone now.
Yeah.
Then?
I can't see.
Yeah. You're good to go, Chairman.
I've only got 3 half pictures here.
Oh right.
Ah, right. Thank you.
There we go.
I'd never be able to run a nuclear submarine. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Right. Okay. Shall we carry on, please? The next item is corporate complaints. To consider issues identified at the 10th of March meeting, which I wasn't part of that. Having in mind the continuing overarching question is the way that the council handles complaints leading to improvements in the service delivery. But I do have a note here that he will review it after 4 quarters of performance information, and that's available. Anyway, right. Does Councillor Tyndall's join us? Good.
Yeah.
Claire Shand, do you want to start off with this?
Thank you, Councillor. I think Councillor Tyndall is going to do the introductions to the paper in terms of the overview, but happy to answer any questions that may arise.
Right, Councillor Tyndall.
Thank you, Chair. On your agenda, it has on number 5, it has Roman numerals 1, 2, and 3, and certain things have been asked to be included in this report. And I think the report covers all these things very, very thoroughly. But one of the things, obviously, is that this is not a static report. The complaints review is a continuing event which goes on, and everything is continually reviewed. What I'd like to, and obviously it covers things, because one of the things I asked was about learning outcomes. They are looked at, as are the complaints procedure and everything else, and the ways of how this is going to be improved. This is all detailed in the report. But I think what I would like to do is either go to Claire or Sharon Betts is here if you've got any detailed questions, because you can, I think you can appreciate, I'm new in the role, I won't know all the detailed answers, but they'll be there to answer any questions you have. So if you want to, if I can leave it there as the introduction and leave you and your members to ask any questions.
Right, okay. Do we have Sharon Betts? Do you want to make a statement and then we have questions, or?
Good evening, Chair. Yes, I'd like to just pick up on a few points on the report, if that's all right, because I think there's some really important messages here. I mean, first of all, for me, the learning from the complaints is recognised as really, really good practice, and the local government and social care ombudsman are keen for local authorities to demonstrate and also evidence, the words evidence, that they are actively using complaints to learn more about performance and perceptions, and that this learning and outcomes are cascaded through the organisation to make positive changes to working practices. I think the table included in the report shows that we are making good progress. 472 new complaints have been logged over the past year, and of these, 145 complaints have learning outcomes allocated to them. And I think it's been helpful also to categorise each complaint to identify patterns and wider causes of specific issues. And you can see there that in the report there were 96 complaints during the period that had an identifiable theme where changes and improvements could be made. So such things as wording of the letter, some additional staff training required, process improvement or workload management. So in summary, learning outcomes are being recorded. We are understanding where we need to improve or make changes, but there's still some work to be done. So in recognition of this, monthly reports that will now be run and provided to directors for discussion with service heads at their service boards. This will give an opportunity for learning outcomes to be fed back to the nominated complaints officers for recording, and complaints data with learning outcomes will be reported in future with the quarterly performance reports. So by continuing to understand the reasons for complaints, by promoting an enabling role in the settlement of complaints, we can learn where we need to improve and be able to better serve our community. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Right. Are there any questions? Councillor Churchman.
Thank you, Chair. One very basic complaint which I've had from one or two sources, admittedly, and if I mention the name Ray, that might ring a bell with some people, is the fact that stuff is printed and sent out to people in ordinary 10 or 12 points. We do not seem as a council to have a system whereby sight impaired people get letters and notifications in large print. Now, to me, this is such a basic thing. After all, we have an elderly population. I counted up the number of people sitting here on this meeting who wear glasses. So if you imagine that in a 10 or 20 years time where macular degeneration, etc. I mean, after all, 55% of our population or 60% of our population are over 55, and we are not catering for the sight impaired. I think my question, Sharon, is when we outsource contracts, do we stipulate in those contracts that communications to constituents across the Isle of Wight, where there is a visually impaired, must receive something in 16-point print? Because, as I said, it's such a basic thing, but causes such a lot of aggravation. And you imagine trying to peer at something and you really don't know what you're trying to read. Thank you.
Chair, if I may, coming in there, if I may.
Yeah.
Councillor Churchman, I have actually been in contact with Ray Clark for some considerable, virtually every week, and I've now got a letter from him about some other issues he's got. So as far as the general thing is concerned, I am on the case on that, but I'll leave Sharon to answer the specific question that you've given.
I think it's really important that we recognise if anybody has a difficulty, that we actually enable them to be able to receive the communication in the method that they want to. Certainly, I can speak for my own service area, which is revenues and benefits and the business centre. We do provide council tax bills in 1.6 point print, which is the advised print for those people who are partially sighted. I know from a communications point of view that we're very, very keen to make sure that publications are printed in the right colours, because there's all sorts of disabilities where people need to have the colour reflection in the right yellow, blues, green fonts, etc., etc. So I think the answer to your question is that where we know that there is a need to make a change, then we're very, very keen to do that. I think the work that we probably need to try and do is to try and gather that information and share that across the council. So we do have some residents where we know that we have to provide documents in a different format, or indeed we do, for council tax purposes, actually provide some residents with taped information.
Right, Councillor Churchman, and then Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the problems that Mr. Clark encountered was, as I said, when we outsource a contract, do we make a stipulation in that contract that residents must be able to receive larger print? And I think this is where maybe we have fallen down. If you can see what I'm getting at, the contract, if we outsource, must contain a statement saying you are liable to produce large print stuff where necessary. Thank you.
Chair, if I may come in again, under my cabinet responsibilities, one of them is procurement. So this is something I'll be taking up with them. But I'll leave Sharon if she's got a specific answer there.
I'm sure that there is information and declaration within contracts to make sure that we have to address everybody's individual need, but I'm not actually aware of any outsourced contracts where that wouldn't be included.
Okay, the Chief Executive would like to come in there, and then Councillor Andre. Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. If I may just make a very brief point. It's probably unlikely we stipulate it absolutely in a contract, but a contract would be governed by English law. And the Local Equalities Act 2010 would mean that any contractor providing information would need to make it accessible to the person and the intended audience. So, you know, if that's not happening, then we can take action with the contractors or work with the contractors to make sure that does happen. So hopefully that answers your question specifically. And I think Councillor Jones-Evans has raised an important point in the chat bar as well, Chairman. If we could avoid mentioning specific constituents by name, because I think there are issues about sort of protecting their interests as well. If we, unless of course they've given us a specific exemption to do so. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Sharon, for joining us tonight. In terms of the, we're looking at specifically the complaints area tonight, but certainly in terms of the call centre, I think members will be well aware that fantastic progress has been made, and that did come to our committee. Reading through the paper, I have to be honest though, I'm slightly disappointed at the lack of ambition that is coming through. More specifically, on page 55, under point 5, where we're talking about baseline targets for stage 1. My first question is, I would prefer to see something along the lines, and is this possible to be worked into the model, that we would want to achieve a 90% success rate of stage 1 complaints that are resolved at that stage, that do not progress to stage 2. So that's my first sort of observation from that. Secondly, I'd like to go on. I do have some issues with the specifically the unreasonable behaviour, unacceptable behaviour policy. Now, the actual name of it was changed from vexatious complainant, but if I've been looking through the material that's available to the public on the website, and it seems to be called different things in different places. So I think there is some confusion over that. I'd also like to know why the complaints policy is reviewed every 2 years, but the unacceptable behaviour policy is reviewed every 3 years. And I would have thought that actually it would be sensible to actually review, get them in line and actually review them at the same time, as because a lot of the actual processes for the complainants, for the actual complaints policy, will also apply to the unacceptable behaviour policy. I'd also like to know, with the unacceptable behaviour policy, are we a listening council? Yes, we have a duty of care to our staff, but we also have a duty of care to our residents to do the best that we possibly can, and that's where we've already said that the learning outcomes come in terms of looking at the actual context of that particular complainant situation, because I think that is very relevant. And if I can actually refer to, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. It's actually page 4 of the unacceptable behaviour policy, and I'm sort of paraphrasing here. It's recognised that reasons from simple frustration to mental illness can result in elements of the unreasonable or the unreasonable behaviour policy being implemented. But I am aware of a situation where a resident was sent a letter that caused them huge distress, despite the fact that I was trying to explain that it was a standard letter. But I don't think, I think in terms of a complaints policy, we do need to be looking at the context of the complainant and not just have a standard procedure of a sort of one size fits all. And finally, there's a flow chart on page 16 of the unreasonable complainant behaviour policy. Is this being fully implemented, and are all stages of that flow chart being adhered to? Thank you.
Right, 4 questions there. Who's going to answer? Who wants to answer those? John, Chief Executive.
Chairman, I'll certainly make a start. I think there was an awful lot in Councillor Andre's statement, and I think it went to the unacceptable behaviour policy, which I don't think is referenced in the papers, unless I've missed something, Councillor Andre. I think there's 2 points I'd make. Firstly, our complaints policy is 9 times out of 10 where somebody thinks we've got something wrong, and we want to try and make every effort to address it. However, it's quite often the case that people, even at stage 1, don't feel like they may still have the same question going into stage 2. They may not feel like we've been able to address it properly, because it's often the more complex cases that come through this mechanism. It's not the fact that you've forgotten to empty my bin or the fact that you haven't cleaned my street this week. It's something that's a much more complex issue, and quite often people feel so passionate about it they will always go to stage 2, and they'll always go to stage 2 because that's the process to go to the local government ombudsman if they want to get to the local government ombudsman as well. And I think we've previously presented to members our report on cases to the local government ombudsman, and we have got a very good track record in how few cases actually go to the ombudsman, and how well the cases are usually handled through stage 1 and through stage 2. So I don't think I mean, we can set a target for 90% to be resolved at stage 1, but I think we have to be realistic in the sense of what is going to be resolved at stage 1 and how passionate people often feel if they're going through that whole process to get a resolution. I think your second point, Councillor Andre, just in terms of, you know, and again, I don't think it's an issue for this evening, but I'm quite happy to have a conversation outside of the meeting, but we do have to have a process where, and especially in days of electronic media, where people who've got a complaint literally write to everybody they can put on the email list, and you get a point where you don't really know who's going to be responding and who has responded and who's expected to respond. So our first step is always to try and, with people who are doing that, because they do feel very passionately about it, is to try and find a way of channeling all of their complaints through a single person, a single point of contact, so that we can manage it and make sure that it's dealt with. Simply firing off complaints to half a dozen councillors and half a dozen officers doesn't actually get the matter resolved. So we have to be able to manage it in the right possible way. And that's often why we would write to somebody saying, look, please work through a single point of contact to get that answer. And of course, some people will just fundamentally disagree with the answer that they get, and it may be that they disagree with our council policy, there may be that they disagree with our council process, but if it's a policy and a process matter that's been previously set out and agreed, then there's nothing we can do about that, and that often causes a frustration, which is why people will go to the second stage of complaints. I hope that helps. I know Claire Shan said she was happy to come in as well, but it gives you a bit of a flavour of what we're doing. And actually, we do get very few people that we actually take through the unacceptable behaviour policy. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, Claire Shan, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And John, I think, has highlighted the points that I would probably want to raise. And just to reinforce the fact that the use of the unacceptable behaviour policy is only done in very rare exceptions, and as John has set out. That said, Councillor Andre has made some very valid points about some of the policy issues there, and we'd certainly be more than happy to look at those. You know, often as officers we don't necessarily see what it's like from the customer perspective when they're trying to find information, or indeed understand or navigate their way through our processes. So that feedback is really, really helpful, and certainly Sharon and I will look into those issues as part of the work that we're doing to improve what we do on complaints processes. So thank you for raising those.
Right. Do you need to ask another question, Councillor Andre?
I think, thank you. I think Claire Shand has really sort of touched it. It was more on looking at things from the customer perspective. And also, I think by the time it's got to the local government ombudsman, that's too late. And obviously, part of this paper was to look at learning outcomes. And I would like to see, obviously, when the CRM kicks in, the customer relationships management system, which is still, I think, only six months. Once that kicks in, I would hope that would actually improve the communication with residents in terms of adjusting, using those learning outcomes to actually evidence the more effective resolutions at the earlier stages, so it doesn't go to the local government ombudsman. But thank you, I appreciate the comments that have come back, and I appreciate that it's going to be taken on board. Thank you.
Right, okay. I think, Councillor, have we finished this particular item now? Do you want? Yes, go on, you, Councillor Lilly, if you want to. You're putting your hand up to tell me to stop.
Thank you. I just got one or two comments or points. The NHS in the West Midlands had a lot of time taken with serial complainants, and what they did was that they actually brought them together and actually paid them to train their staff how to write letters and how to actually respond to them, and they actually reduced their complaints by 80% in 12 months from that. So perhaps we should actually positively embrace some of the people that do regularly complain and actually use their skill and expertise in actually reversing it. That's one particular point. The other is about context, and I think some of the, if you look, there are patterns with some of the complaints, and I'm not referring, but I am in a ward which has a lot of people who are very unhappy with certain council policies, and I actually think in those situations where you know there is a theme, the floating bridge is a good one to actually look at, that actually bringing people together with their local councillors and officers to see how can you improve on how you react to that particular theme and that geographic unhappiness or community of interest and happiness. And I think it's great that you've got this lessons learned, but how can we, as suggested by Councillor Andre, actually reduce this by actually getting to the core reason of the unhappiness of that, and how that can be overcome, because people complain because they're not listened to.
Right.
That's my point.
Okay. I think that we've probably dealt with this item now, as far as so we accept this report. Yes. Okay. Right, and we'll move on, please, if we may. Sorry?
I think Mr. Metcalfe wanted to make.
Mr. Metcalfe.
Thank you, Chairman. You've accepted the report. I'll please move on. I'll reserve my comment for later.
Okay, right. Now we move on to other items to be considered by the Cabinet on the 12th of November. The quarterly performance report, quarter 2. Who wants to kick off with that? Councillor Lilly.
I just got 1 or 2 questions from the quarterly report.
Yes.
I'll just go through them quickly all together, if that could be noted. One was on page 59, which is relating to children in care and the increase in numbers relating to COVID. I think the particular thing is the national figure has gone up to 5%, but on the island it's 7%. And I just wanted to know how that is affecting the budget, because obviously we know that when children come into care, that is something that we can't control financially, and it does actually affect the overall budget. So going from having a 7% compared to the national average of 5% would be considerable. My second question is to do with the on page 70, which was to do with the ride transport hub, and I just wanted to know when work might start on that, because obviously that is an amazing thing, and that also links, I think, Councillor Stewart, to the issue of the ferries. The whole point of that work is to link to the Fast Cat and to the development of that link. So we do need to know that link is going to continue, with the 10 million being spent on it, and obviously the millions on the Portsmouth side. And my last question is to do with page 86, which was to do with the Ryde and Ventnor harbours, and I wanted to know when it was going to be in the forward plan for a delegated decision, because I know the officers have done all the work on that. Those are my 3 questions.
Right.
Chair, I think Steve Crocker's on the call.
Yes, Steve Crocker.
He can deal with the children one. Yeah. And then the second question, which is about Ride Hub. I just think it's acknowledgeable. I think Brian can probably deal with that. And then the third one, which was in relation to the harbours, I think Brian can probably deal with that as well. So if we go to Steve Crocker first, Chair.
Right, Mr.
Thanks, Councillor Lee, for the question. It's a good question. In the immortal words of Chairman Mao, it's too early to say, because it's the numbers here are incredibly volatile in the aftermath of COVID. So what I can say, if we look at it, picture nationally, we know that in the period during the immediate lockdown of March and April, the numbers coming into children's social care across the country and echoed on the Isle of Wight, those numbers fell. What we then found, as society opened up, and in particular as we had more eyes upon children, more professional eyes upon children, the referral rates increased and the numbers of child protection investigations increased and the numbers of children looked after increased. And arguably, although one could say it's too early to say, it's because we were not able in that earlier lockdown to get those referrals into us at an earlier enough point, and families broke down, and that is a pattern that is around across the country. What the next phase of this looks like is careful evaluation of the degree to which that increase is with us to stay,
whether it's an increase that has that will even out over time, whether there are other things that we can do, including rehabilitation of children back home with their families when families have made the right changes, which will bring that number down in due course, and whether we can do anything innovative to do that. And the council on the Isle of Wight has invested £200,000 for its transformation fund to enable us to look at new ways of working, better training for social workers, so that we can help families to be more resilient to change and therefore to look after their children safely at home rather than coming to care. It's a major undertaking, and it's probably that's probably the short answer that I can give. I'd get into a very long answer, but that's certainly some councillors here in the Children's Policy and Scrutiny Committee, and we certainly dive into the detail in that at that committee. But that's the short answer.
Right. I've forgotten what the other two questions were, Councillor. What?
Ride Transport Hub.
Oh yes, Ride Transport Hub.
Councillor Tyndall.
Councillor Tyndall on there?
No, he's muted.
No, you're muted. You're muted. You're still muted, Councillor Tyndall. Right. All right, Councillor Tyndall, you're still muted. Can I? No, you're still muted. Colin Rowland.
Oh, here he is.
That's okay. Colin Rowland can answer that question.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Tyndall. We don't as yet have a start date. However, we do have a end date of 2023, which is set by the DFT grant conditions. All I would say is the first steps will be to develop the initial designs that we produced as part of the bid, and that will be part of a consultation process with local members, local businesses and the community in Ryde.
Right. Colin, Ms. Brown Tyndall, you're still muted.
No, I'm not muted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right, okay. It's on number 3 about the Ryde Harbour question. I had a meeting on Thursday, and I think what I can say is the purchase of the harbour by Ryde Council has been very positively looked at and will be taken forward. There was the other issue of other items that Ryde wanted to include, which will be under a lease. Now, those items need to be discussed in a bit more detail, but it is moving forward and it's very positive.
Right. Is that all 3 questions now?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Yep. I think we're there on that, aren't we? Right, Councillor Quirk.
If you go to page 56, I've raised this with the leader of the council already, but we have the additional demands placed on the Isle of Wight Council and partners owing to pandemic flu. Currently, our inherent score is red, not very good. Our current score is red, not very good. But our target score, our aspiration, is also red. And I can't accept that we should have an aspiration that we're going to be bad.
What page was that?
56. Page 56.
Oh, 56. I shall try the answer. Right. Okay. Right. Yes. Okay. Who wants to answer that?
Well, what I'm going to very nicely do is sidestep this one and pass it to our chief executive. I think that's the way to do it, and he's on the screen.
Yes.
But I have to say, I think, well, it'd be interesting to see what the chief exec says.
Thank you, Leader. It's a risk assessment about how the impact, if you like, of pandemic flu. So effectively, we use 2 criteria. We talk about likelihood and we talk about impact. So in the case of something like the pandemic flu, the impact is always going to be serious, as we've seen now. And in terms of the risk scoring matrix that we use, which I'm very happy to share with members, if the impact is always going to be major, which is where we are now, then we'll never be able to get the inherent score below red, because the impact is always going to be significant. So we can move the likelihood, and as we move the likelihood, so we might score 16 if you like for the overall risk, but if we move the likelihood so it's less likely, the risk might move to 14 or 13, but the impact, the overall risk is still going to be red because of the impact criteria that we use. As I say, I'm very happy to share the risk scoring matrix that we use to assess all of these risks so that members can see how that works.
I would like to see that, but we can increase things such as the uptake of vaccine. We can look at things as to how the hospital prepares itself for pandemics. I still think that a red target score is actually not a good scenario.
Absolutely. So all of the things that you've just mentioned there, Councillor Quirk, would be the mitigations that would reduce the likelihood, but the impact, if it still happened, would still be significant as we've seen it. So it would always be in the red score. But very happy for us to have a chat and take you through the risk matrix that we use and how we've come to that conclusion.
Thank you.
Right. Any more on the quarterly?
Councillor James Evans.
Councillor James Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. On page 69, the draft parking report from Wight Young Green, I believe, is in existence now. I saw a cabinet member waving it around at a meeting yesterday, but I think what the rest of us who are very keen on parking matters would like to know when we're going to be able to see this ourselves, the other members, please.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes, I'll ask Councillor Ward if he will respond to that, as it's parking. He may, and if not, then I will then refer to the director. But Councillor Ward may be in a position to deal with that.
We had I'll call it a technical problem. The parking report is 135 pages long. Okay, and quite frankly, the parking board has not had a chance to read it yet and make comment. So it's still in that draft form.
Yeah.
So, but once we do get a chance to read it, and I've just got my copy quite literally this week, and I will read it and then make comments to the parking board, and we'll go forward from there.
So when the rest of the members are allowed to see the report?
Well, at least when the parking board's had a chance to review it, you know, we might say no, we don't accept that, and off it goes.
So this takes you back to the point I made, Councillor James Evans. The way the cabinet runs the council is through a series of boards, and here's another example, parking board. So that's a cabinet position at the moment. Once the cabinet have taken a position, they'll obviously share that with the wider membership.
But I think my point being, if I may, Leader, is that this is the document that's been produced with a lot of input from local people and associations and so on, and the public money's gone towards it. So why can't members of this council have a look at it?
They do. That's not quite how we run the process, though. You're listening. We run a process on the cabinet.
No, I hear what you're saying, but as a member of the public watching, it's public money. It's it's gone towards it, and everyone's fed into it. So I don't see why we only get to see a sanitised version of it, the one that you find acceptable in some way. Perhaps I got it wrong, but that's how it appears to me.
I don't think anybody's mentioned sanitisation. I think it's just a case of timing.
And just for supplementary, if I may, Chair, sorry, Chairman, there's regarding the residents parking schemes. Obviously, Newport and Carisbrooke Community Council has paid a substantial amount of money towards the officer to get this work done. And again, there seems to be delays with Island Roads on this, with getting prices from them just to do the TROs and the work. So I was just wondering again, how is that progressing, Councillor Ward? Because there's residents there getting very frustrated. It's been a year since they were being surveyed, and they're obviously still suffering the same situation that they were before.
I think the reality is that we are in we have had lockdown, and Island Roads have had furloughed staff and all that sort of stuff as well. But if you want to come to me with specific issues, then I will look into them for you.
Right. Any further questions on that? I have one. and that's on page 70. As it says, the bottom page said it undertake a feasibility study to understand the potential cost benefit analysis for Medina Bridge. Just as a question, is there anything in the pipeline, or have we ever considered a simple bridge over Coppins Bridge? Because if you go to the top of the A316 by Hogarth's house and the Fuller's Brewery, there's a very, what's known as the Rickety Rackety Bridge. There's a very sort of simple one-lane bridge, and it relieves a huge amount of traffic. And since Coppins Bridge is the seems to be the major pinch point, or one of the major pinch points, but the major pinch point, I wonder if we've ever considered something there. Councillor, I'll ask Councillor Stewart first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, it's no secret that I am totally in favour of a Medina Bridge.
Yes.
And I think so, not just because of the traffic, and we have to remember this was pre-COVID, so obviously currently we're not getting the same traffic movements. Because not only did I think it will alleviate some of the pressure into Newport, but actually I think it's a positive infrastructure development which will give people better and quicker access across the island. And I will certainly be advocating that as we go forward in the coming months, because I think it's the right thing to do. You're absolutely right. There are a number of options been suggested. One, maybe it's all about cost and analysis, but I don't just consider the cost, and I've made this clear to officers. I think we need to look at the social and environmental value of these things. And again, I'm not saying that we would have it as an alternative to the floating bridge, but were we to have a Medina Bridge in there now, certainly some of the traffic issues that we have into Newport and beyond, the West Wight, the East Wight, would be alleviated. So I think the short answer is I'm very sympathetic to a Medina Bridge. I'm quite interested in your innovative suggestion around the road on the mainland, but happy to share thoughts with Scrutiny Committee if they wish to.
It's the A316.
Yeah, there's
Councillor James Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to be helpful, back in 2007, a former senior planning officer presented this very idea of a flyover across Coppins Bridge, but it never went anywhere. So excuse the pun. But I think you know, as a council and as a community, we're really looking down to having less vehicles on the road, surely. And I'm very looking forward to the outcome of the feasibility study into having rail links or some sort of other public transport link between Ryde and Newport, for instance. I think that's where we need to be going, as the Councillor Stewart's rightly said.
Yeah, I think you make some valid points. Obviously, the Secretary of State for Transport has reminded everybody that he doesn't see cycling as an alternative to cars. I'm sure you read that. And of course, Queen Victoria didn't see the floating bridge as an alternative to a proper crossing. So a lot of profile people have their views, but in practical terms, I've explained where I am, and I'm hoping Newport Parish and Town Council or Community Council will be supportive, and it sounds like the current chair would be, so that's good news, I think.
Supportive of what, Councillor Stewart?
Medina
exactly?
Bridge.
Well, I thought that it says actually it wouldn't be really, well, though it's feasible, it's actually not going to happen because it's prohibitive costs. So I thought that was a non-starter.
Well, that's some people's views. Obviously, different people have different views, and I certainly believe it's the right thing for the island, and I've been public about that. Cost is clearly a position at the moment, as you know and others know. Our financial resources are being stretched pretty close to the line, and obviously that has to take priority. But we should always be looking for a innovative future. Ian Ward wants to come in on it, I think.
Well, actually, I was just trying to give some background to the chairman's comment about sorting out Coppins Bridge with a flyover. Quite clearly, we haven't gone down that line. But I'd just like to point out, the roadworks that are going on at St Mary's Junction, everybody focuses on that, but actually that's only one part of the Newport traffic plan. There are other junction projects and things like that around Newport to help alleviate the traffic, and this is all being paid for by the government. So that is, I just want to let people know that it's not just about St Mary's. Okay.
Right. Any other points?
Councillor Andre.
Councillor who? Andre, beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to say that I am very familiar with the A316 and the Hogarth flyover. It would be my preference, supporting the leader. I think the idea is to alleviate the traffic before it gets into Newport, and I don't think a flyover would do that.
Okay.
I think, to be clear, what's actually stated on page 70 rather, is that an initial study carried out by Hampshire County Council indicated that the funding such a scheme might be prohibitive, but from what I read into it, it's that we are going to undertake a feasibility study, because I would be very, very supportive of a bridge over Medina, because I think in terms of the total traffic flow for the island, this would make a significant difference. I just think it's a shame that the 9 million that we received from government wasn't put into that rather than St Mary's. Thank you.
Right. Okay. The St Mary's roundabout has been around for a long, long time. Question. Now, moving on. Has anyone else got any others? I've got one, and that's to do with the environment, heritage, and waste management, and the recycling. It says that we will continue with the booking system. We get criticised for the booking system, but are you aware of how much happier the staff are now at Longbottom? They say that it is working much better, and they are not receiving the abuse that they used to receive. I asked the question, are you aware of that?
Yeah, so I'll invite Councillor Hastings, who I think is on the call. I can't see his name in front of me, to respond. But from the leader's perspective, obviously those restrictions were brought in to deal with COVID in the first wave, as you recall, and COVID hasn't gone away. So it's first of all important that we keep our community safe. I think it is a credit to the community of the island that they have really taken up the option of the booking system, and we've modified it. I'm sure Steve will talk about that. And I know other local authorities off island are actually asking us questions as to how we have achieved it. Steve, you're probably better placed than me to give some detail on that, and I think it'd be a really good opportunity to say how well that's gone.
Well, you've pretty well said it, Leader. Yes, it has gone exceedingly well. It was put in as an attempt to make things work and make it better and what have you. We have had approaches from other authorities wanting to know how we put it together and how well it's working. It's been adjusted slightly here and there to make it work even better, because there was a point where you could book but you couldn't cancel, which seems a little silly to me, because if you're then not going to turn up for whatever reason, there's a space that's lost. So now you can book and you can cancel. We don't get the queues on the road. It's much better for the operatives as well. I think that's a crucial point. It's much better and safer and easier for them to handle. Yeah, and it's working exceedingly well. What more can I say?
That's absolutely right. And of course, it's open during lockdown.
And it will be open during lockdown, and that's because we put it together in the first lockdown. We now come to the second lockdown, and it can continue, and it can be available and open. Right.
Councillor Andre, did you want to make a comment there, or was that a previous one?
No, just a quick comment on that, to say, just to sort of really echo what Councillor Hastings has said. Since the booking system has been in place, I have had such great feedback from residents. I've used the system myself, and I think we can't underestimate the point that was raised about the effect that it's actually had on the staff there. It's just totally revolutionise the whole system. And I think there is another added benefit from it, that actually, if people have to book, I think it's getting into residents' minds, into all of our minds, how important it is that we recycle as much as possible, and that we are, disposing of our rubbish very responsibly. And it also goes to support the objectives that we have an extremely good record on this island in terms of recycling, because we have a fantastic team. So I think it's a real good news story.
Okay.
Chairman, I couldn't have said that better myself. And just this week, I have written to all the operatives at Amy and them for their dedication and hard work and keeping up the process even through hard times, and just today received a letter back from them thanking me for that. So public relations is going well as well.
Good. Right. Well, we look forward to the Forest Road
energy from waste. It's coming.
Energy from waste coming on stream.
It's coming.
Right. Shall we move on? Please, talking of Forest Road, the sad one. Forest Road, Whitehouse Road Junction. Why is it no longer being considered by the Cabinet in November?
Yes, so we've only recently received the reports from Island Roads which are commissioned. Obviously, members are now aware of the outcome of the inquest, and in fact, there was a retrial on the individual concerned as to the sentence that was issued. So all of that has to be taken into account. We've also now got, and we've had to refer that back to Island Roads for more information. So the report that we need in order to deal with that, and we are generally, I've got a number of proposals coming forward at the moment. We've had to defer that to our next meeting, and obviously Scrutiny will get that before us.
Right. The next hot potato is Newport Harbour Master Plan.
Yes, now we have, on the one hand, we've got, I think we've got Chris Ashman still on the call, I think so. And what I can say on the Newport Harbour Master Plan is laid out in some depth now in the papers. It's going forward. I'm sure members and probably the public are pleased to see that some initial proposals around Seacrest Park and some building that was initially being looked at in terms of the entrance. We've taken into account the feedback received from residents in the area through the local councillor Matt Price, as well as other aspects, and that has now been changed, which I think is a good thing. I would like to say on this, and I think this has been a long journey. Chris, who may have some comments to make, Chris Ashman has been with us from the outset. I think it's an excellent piece of professional work that's been done to try and bring Newport alive. It links in with very much the historic towns work that I know Julie has been working with, and I think what we've got to do here is really embrace this and use it to bring our capital town of the island really alive, and at the same time to get the benefits of that regeneration. Chris, that's your lead in. Would you add anything to that, Chris Ashman?
Just wait for the red mark. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Leader. No, I don't think I've got anything to add. Thank you, Leader. Obviously, the report speaks for itself, and I think it's fair to say the tone of the master plan has the right balance between ambition for the county town and the island, and pragmatism in terms of the delivery, particularly in the current market circumstances. And yeah, it's been very much a joint process with the wider community in the business sector and the wider residents community to actually get to a deliverable master plan. And obviously we look forward with the comments of Scrutiny this evening and hopefully the approval of Cabinet on Thursday to actually moving forward with the implementation of the projects contained within the plan.
Right. Does anyone have any comments? I have one comment. Councillor Jones Evans and then Councillor Lilly.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And so it's been a long time coming. I think even in my very first election address in 2009, I put in there that the Newport Harbour is the jewel in the crown, and so it is. It's got so much potential down there, and as well as being a still working harbour, I think that still has been recognised within the master plan. And I can't fault, really. We've had three years of wide public engagement, from very nice sort of social events to events down on the harbour itself, to obviously the online consultation and so on. So I think as a piece of work, it's got a great credibility and almost a mandate there. And I'm also very pleased, as is everyone in Newport, that Councillor Matthew Price has managed to persuade the leadership and Regen that that is not an appropriate place for housing. So I think it's absolutely vital that we get an iconic building out of this, a conferencing facility, hotel, all the things that a county town or capital of a county should have. And I think we've got a good balance here. Obviously, there's a long way to go. We're still going to get the harbour vision order through, and then it's got to be adopted into the island plan. And I'm sure it's a long journey, but we've already 3 years down the road. And I would like to endorse this really, and thank all the officers for all the hard work and all the community for putting their input into it as well. And obviously it's going to be delivered in a chunked up way, but I think we've got a good vision, which is where you need you need to know where you're going, don't you, to get there.
Right. Who else wanted to? Who? Councillor Lilly. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, firstly, I think it's very important. I'm a Ryde councillor, so it's very important for me to respect that actually it's very much the Newport councillors who need to put their views, and therefore I support Councillor Jones Evans as the chair of the Community Council in Carisbrooke and Newport, and if they are happy, then it definitely got 100% support from me. And the particular area I do want to raise is about Riverside and the voluntary sector. This Riverside houses a number of organisations, including Vectors Radio, an incredibly important carers centre. We have a huge amount of about, I think, 16,000 unpaid carers, and I actually get that support from that centre. And the likes of a range of organisations that are based at Riverside, like Isle of Wight Health Watch, Community Action, Isle of Wight itself, and all its various activities. So it is the hub of the voluntary sector for the Isle of Wight, and therefore I suppose it's reassurance to those to the voluntary sector, to Community Action Isle of Wight, to Isle of Wight Carers, Vectors Radio, that they are going to benefit from this development if Riverside is knocked down, which could be a possibility. Therefore, there is going to be a replacement which actually builds on their terrific work, and that's been highlighted through COVID. We need that very strong voluntary sector, and we need to give reassurance to them. Please, can you give me reassurance that I can give back to them?
I'll take that, Chair. I'll respond. So quite clearly, the Newport Master Plan, I'm actually quite proud of this administration's drive and leadership on this, because I think it's a real opportunity to deliver. And I'm pleased also that, amongst many other things, Newport Community Council are working with us and are keen to see this as well. I think, and I've worked a lot with those local community groups you mentioned, Michael, so I would definitely reassure you that we would make sure they're looked after. And the other thing which the actual master plan highlights is the number of houses that this will provide on brownfield sites, and indeed affordable housing, which is such an important area. So I think overall I'm very proud to lead the drive on this, But I think this is an all-island effort that we've got to look forward to. And Ryde won't miss out, Michael. Ryde won't miss out.
That's another discussion.
All right.
If I might help, Chair, with that, just want to say, though it's not my side of the river, it's Councillor Price's, but it was picked up very early on in the consultation that the function and the offer of all of that community hub at the Riverside Centre was absolutely integral to our community. So very early days, that was built into whatever's going to happen down there, but in a more modern, fit for purpose way. So it totally integrated. It was absolute. I can't say enough how important that is to our local community, and as is the connectivity we're getting with the little the footbridge. That's another really important link, that we're linking those two sides of the river. So we're getting a tiny mini little Medina bridge there, Councillor Stewart, out of it.
Yes. Thank you, Councillor James Evans. If I may say two things. First of all, don't worry, Councillor Lilly, we wouldn't hesitate to tell you when you're going wrong and right. And I just hope that when we come to sort of design, etc., that we respect the Georgian nature of Newport. We have some horrendous buildings around Newport, which I think most people wish was never there, including County Hall. But a bomb will go off in a minute and I will be gone. You'll be pleased. Anyway, so if we have that respect, I think that could be an added bonus.
I think, Chair, you actually echo the thoughts of the historic towns body that came over to the island, and both Julie and I and others had the opportunity to meet, and it's almost like they're speaking your language. I'm not sure if you'd tip them off or whatever, but they were really impressed with Newport, and rightly they should be. There's some fantastic architecture there.
Never spoken to them, too busy about thinking about Ryde.
But,
right.
And also the industrial heritage as well. Don't forget, we've got amazing power, the old power plant down there. That's a fantastic, iconic. That old not the sawtooth buildings. They're there as well, but the step building. The 1910 building. There's some great features down there that I know have been really picked up in the master plan. So we're not going to lose our industrial heritage. It's just as important as our beautiful Georgian heritage as well.
Right. Have we said enough about the Newport master plan, harbour master plan? I think so. Right, moving on, approval of the revised constitution. And we had a meeting on the 13th of October about this. Oh yes, right. I can't see. Who wants the revised constitution?
I think my recollection, Chair, is that the Scrutiny Committee have had a particular brief on this, and indeed much of their contributions considered. I'd like to thank our interim, although now former, although I think he's on the call, Mr. Wild, who's put a lot of work into the constitution document as a whole. And has been very open and transparent with it, and I'm hoping that Scrutiny will feel comfortable in supporting the document as it goes forward to full council.
Yes.
He may wish to comment. He is on the call if you want him
to. Councillor Churchman.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got on page 3 of the recommendations. Recommendations to Cabinet, we talk about 2 independent non-voting for the Audit Committee. I would like somehow added to that with maths expertise, because I think it's so important that if you're going to have an Audit Committee, that you've got people there who really do understand the maths of what is going on. And my other comment would have been, if you turn over page 62, we talk about public speaking at the Planning Committee from 3 to 5 minutes. But when we had our little meeting, did we remember that you have a main speaker, but if there are more than one speaker, then you split the minutes between them? Now, to me, it's all right giving the primary speaker 5 minutes, but if you then say, oh, there are 3 speakers and they get a minute and 3/4 each, you not defy, but then it doesn't make sense. I would like to see that the main speaker has 5 minutes and then maybe additional speakers get 3. I really think that's important. Thank you.
If I may make a comment here, having experienced a different regime in another council, it seemed to me really perverse that you had an application as large as the Sam White's yard. I think I can't remember how many pages in the documents it had. I mean, there were acres and acres of pages, and that we had 3 minutes, or the speakers had 3 minutes. I wasn't part of it at all. I wasn't in the council then. But and so it may well be that the cabinet could sort of take away or rethink and just say, look, you know, what can happen is that for very large applications, there's a little more time, but for smaller ones, you still only need you only need 3 minutes. I mean, if it's one person talking about their house, they should be able to put that across in about 3 minutes, no less. But I know the chief executive, but you don't want to prolong. It's a difficult one, but you have justice has to be seen to be done. Do you want to make a comment on that, chief executive?
No, sorry, Chairman. I think the point I was making was the original points that were raised by the Scrutiny Committee have all been considered as part of the revised report to Cabinet.
Okay.
So certainly the move to 5 minutes is a change to the original report. I think I think in terms of Councillor Churchman's comments, that I think there's an acceptance the independent persons need to be appropriately qualified, and I think that would pick up any accountancy or math skills as Councillor Churchman describes them. So if there was a specific point about what has or hasn't been changed, then Mr. Wild would be able to answer a specific question. But of course, I think for this evening, if there's anything in addition that you would like considered, then that would be for you to make a recommendation to Cabinet. So thank you, and I'm sorry for interrupting.
Okay, no, that's all right. Is Mr. Wild there?
Yes, Chairman, I'm here.
Would you like to make a comment at all?
Well, first of all, I'd like to express my thanks to the Scrutiny Committee for spending such a considerable amount of time looking at this document and coming forward with some very constructive responses. That's exactly what I hoped would happen from the consultation exercise. So thank you for that. In terms of the comments made this evening, in addition to those, yes, there is already a requirement that any members of the Audit Committee are suitably skilled, qualified or experienced to meet the requirements of the Audit Committee's terms of reference. And there's always a discretion, I think, on the part of the chairman to allow public speaking in the right circumstances to be extended that little bit longer if appropriate. And so I think those points are very well made, but I think there's sufficient provision probably already within the Constitution, within the Chairman's discretion to provide for that. But I'm happy, as the Chief Executive said, to take on any further comments that may be made. I think any and all are welcome.
Right. Okay. Any more comments on that? No. Right. So are we going to we'll just move on? Committee's work plan for 2020-21. Council's forward plan. Have got any comments on that? Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, with regard to the work plan, I know that this committee has actually done quite a lot of work in the past, but I noticed that there's nothing scheduled for the PFI contract. and I would like to have that on the work plan for the chair to decide at what date to receive an update on where we currently are on the performance of the PFI contract.
We're looking at January.
We're looking at that in January, apparently. Right. Hang on, Councillor Andre. We're looking at that in January.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay. Didn't want to unmute.
Right. As regards to the council's forward plan, getting back to the I think we've jumped a bit there. Council's forward plan. Is there anything that people are concerned about that? No. Right. Then we go to B, our work plan. Now we've partly covered that.
I think Councillor Lilly wanted to raise.
Councillor Lilly. Councillor Lilly, is this about?
I just wanted to raise that on the work plan, the commercialisation strategy, it said an update to be provided. It was linked to the 10th of November. Is that being pushed to the meeting in January?
We'll have discussions on that, yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Okay. I mean, there any other comments about that? Fine. Members' question time. No written questions received.
Councillor Julie Jones-Evans.
Councillor Jones-Evans, yeah.
That's very kind, Chairman. I know traditionally it's written questions. I'm just wondering why we've got the Director of Regen on the call. I'm just wondering whether he could give me or give us all an update on the success or otherwise of the Let's Buy Local campaign, which I know the council has backed. It's been going on since I think May time. Just whether there's an update on that at all, please.
Question. Councillor Jones-Evans, question.
Did you not hear my question?
No, what was the question?
The question was, can we have an update on the Let's Buy Local campaign? Was I actually muted?
No.
Oh,
no.
okay, that was my question. Could we have an update if possible? I see the Director of Regen's on the call.
Okay.
Sorry, I must make myself clearer in future. Apologies.
Happy to give an update, Chair. The council supported a previous campaign being progressed by our colleagues in Natural Enterprise, which was to promote the quality and the success of island businesses, and particularly in light of our recovery plan, the Economic Board agreed to support an extension of that campaign from its original summer timescale up to the end of the year, particularly taking account of the crucial Christmas period. So the campaign has evolved into promoting the success and value of high street businesses in particular, given the impacts they've obviously recently been suffering with regard to the second closure. And the Economic Board will be evaluating the impact of that campaign in terms of local spend, in terms of informing any future interventions regarding local purchasing. I think the other, if I might, Chair, just highlight the other intervention linked to keeping island expenditure in these difficult times was the launch last week of the Wight gift card to encourage again islanders to support local businesses right across the island by committing some of their discretionary spend at this time of year, their planned spending, towards giving their friends and family a gift of the island in terms of committing spend to local businesses, and we continue to promote that as a mechanism for islanders to support local businesses. So looking at a range of measures and continuing to try and promote that principle of local economic development and recycling the island pound.
Right. Okay, Councillor Jones-Evans.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing that question. That's very helpful.
Right. Also on the Cabinet agenda is the appointment of the leader to the combined fire authority. Are there any questions about that, or we're in agreement? I think we're in agreement. Anyone disagree? Right.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Cabinet. It's also Cabinet. That's interesting promotion. It's a Scrutiny Committee. Always appreciated.
Right. The only thing I would just say is I'm delighted to see that that Island Milk and individual farms are selling milk, and so we won't have to rely upon some of the rubbish that we've been sold in the past. There we are. So that's the end of this meeting. Thank you very much indeed. And can I thank the officers for doing all the electronics, etc., extremely well. Thank the officers, all the officers for attending, and cabinet members and you council members as well, and members of the public. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody.